Hi, everyone, and welcome to Grace Church on Father's Day Sunday. So all of you dads, all of you men, happy Father's Day. I'm so glad that you're here for another online worship service. And I want to say congratulations to all of our graduates, all of our students who have graduated high school, graduated college, finished grad school, all of our elementary and junior hires that promoted to a new era of schooling. Congratulations. I'm proud of you. Well done, especially during a tough year like we've had. So just awesome that you're making progress. We all love you. And also, Grace, thank you. Speaking of students, thank you for how generously you gave toward our summer camp. We have a junior high and a senior high camp this summer. And you gave so wonderfully that our parents are only going to have to pay a very small portion of the camp fees. So thank you. That's awesome. So we're done collecting funds for camp, but thank you. And thank you just for continuing to give to Grace. You are amazing. Also, just a couple of quick announcements here on the front end. A reminder that this Tuesday, I'm going to be starting a Spirit-Empowered Ministry online class. This will be a 4-week Zoom class, and we've been sending out emails with details, and so hopefully you've seen those things. Also, we're having a great summer right now with our Better Man Summer Series. We're meeting every Thursday night through July, and it's been fantastic. And also, I hope that you're following our summer reading plan, and hopefully that book's been meaningful and is speaking to you and is a good complement to our Kingdom and Chaos teaching series we've been doing. And then just a couple more quick things. Next Sunday, we have 2 very special things happening. First of all, in the service in the morning, Dr. Stan Fleming from Gatebreaker Ministries will be preaching. And of course, if you recall, this is the ministry that we just gave toward to raise funds for a school in Pakistan for children that have been taken out of slavery or still involved in forced labor. And this is an amazing chance to hear firsthand from Dr. Fleming. So also in that service, we're going to be live streaming. I have loved these recorded services. I've taken them just as seriously as our in-person services, and it's been an honor to record and present to you, our online friends and church. But this coming week, we're going to shift to live stream. So hopefully you'll enjoy that experience. It might feel like you're with the church a little bit more than watching the recorded version, but that's going to happen this Sunday morning. Give us grace as we work out those details. We're going to figure out live stream here. And then in the evening next Sunday, we're going to be doing a night of worship and prayer where we also show a documentary from Agape International Missions called Tending Clouds. And it's going to be a heavy but really inspiring and wonderful night of worship, prayer, and then a documentary screening. For those of you online, you're welcome to join us, of course, or we're also going to be airing that same documentary for you to watch online as well. So all of that is next Sunday. Details have been sent out to you. Contact us if you have any questions. And with that, thank you for being here to worship. All through church history, worship begins. This is the mindset of people through church history. Worship is not just singing. Worship begins with the gathering. When we assemble, and whether you're assembling online right now or when we assemble in person, the act of gathering is actually the very first act of worship. The fact that we come together in response to God's summons is worship. So thank you for responding. Thank you for being here. Thank you for worshiping. God bless you, and I'll talk to you in just a little bit.
He's coming on the cloud, kings and kingdoms will open up the gates. So open up the gates, make way before the King of Kings. Our God who comes to save is here to set the captives free. For who can stop the Lord Almighty? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles. Every knee will bow before Him. Our God is the Lamb that was slain for the sin of the world. His blood breaks the chains, and every knee will bow before the Lion and the Lamb. Oh, every knee will bow before Him. Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord Almighty? Who can stop the Lord? Our God is the Lion of Judah. He's roaring with power and fighting our battles.
So happy Father's Day. Look at this, you got a video.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day. I love you so much, and God's praying for you.
Happy Father's Day, Dad. I've made a paper for you.
I love you.
I love you. You're the best family member, and you are the best dad I ever had.
I got you a paper.
Happy Father's Day, Wes, and love you.
One thing I would say to Dad on Father's Day is thank you for caring for everyone.
One thing I want to say is thank you for helping us with math even though you're in meetings.
One thing I'd say to my father on Father's Day is thank you for being my dad.
On Father's Day, I would say to you, thank you for being such an amazing father, and the father that a lot of people wish that they had. And that just, man, every time I thank the Lord for such a great dad, because that means that I get a picture of God, my Father, and you're a great picture of that to me. Thank you.
If today was Father's Day, I'd probably say I love him. I'd help him with a lot of stuff outside. I'd put my other things aside for a second and go help him. Yeah.
Happy Father's Day, Joe. Thank you so much for, again, everything that you do. I couldn't ask for anyone better.
I would say Happy Father's Day, and I would say I love you, and thanks for teaching me about baseball, and Happy Father's Day.
One thing I would say to my dad on Father's Day is thank you for being the best dad.
If today was Father's Day, I would say I love you, as I always do, and I would also say thank you for what you do for our family and how you impact the lives of your students in the classroom. Because I know that you may not always feel like you're impacting them spiritually, but you're one of the reasons they're going to our school.
Hi, love you. That's it.
I did it.
All right, well, once again, happy Father's Day, guys. Thank you for stepping up in the incredible roles of dads, fathers, foster dads, stepfathers, coaches, mentors, uncles. Thank you for pursuing a form of masculinity that is patterned after the way and the character and the life of Jesus. That kind of manhood is the furthest thing from toxic. That kind of manhood is healing and life-giving and empowering, and it's part of the antidote for our world today. So guys, I honor you. I love you men, and it's an honor to be alongside you here at Grace Church. I thought about bringing a Father's Day message today. You know, we're doing a series right now called Kingdom and Chaos, and I thought about bringing a Father's Day message, but I've decided to go in a different direction from both of those themes. I'm not going to continue the Kingdom and Chaos message today, and I guess I'll talk about dads in a roundabout way today, but I was preaching in a church in Colorado Springs last Sunday, and they asked me to speak on a very specific subject. This church is doing a summer teaching series from the book of Proverbs, and the series is called How Do I ... So they're using the Proverbs to answer very practical questions like, how do I become wise? How do I manage money? How do I parent well? And they asked me if I would address the question of how do I find true love? And I wasn't planning on sharing that here, but that's an important question. You know, for some single adults, that's the most important question. But it's actually a much bigger question than how do I find a sweetheart? Now, I am going to try and help out with that question a little bit today. But this question transcends that. This question applies to all of us, whether we're looking for love or whether we're in love or whether we're disappointed in love today. This is a question that applies to all of us. And so I want to try and just rope everybody who's watching into this particular question of how do I find true love? Because no doubt we have single adults that would love to be married. And we probably have single adults who are perfectly content in their singleness and they have no interest in getting married. We have some happily married couples and we have some not so happily married couples. We have widows and widowers. We have adults who are single after having lost a spouse. And that will be most of us, by the way, who are married. Most of us who are married today will be single again from losing a spouse. And then we also, of course, have some people who have been divorced. And I want to say something at the very front end of this message to any person watching who has been divorced. Being divorced does not necessarily mean that you failed in marriage. In fact, being divorced does not mean that you failed in marriage any more than the existence of atheism means that God has failed at being God. A love relationship with a free-willed human being is risky, even for God. It's risky to give your heart to another person. And God is still an amazing God, even if there are some people who don't believe in him. And you may have been an incredible spouse, even if your marriage ended in divorce. See, success in marriage is not dependent on one spouse, it's dependent on two. And there's only so much that you can control in a relationship with another free-willed person. I mean, we all know people who were amazing spouses. You can probably think of somebody right now who was an incredible spouse. That they were kind and gracious and loving and served and interesting and loved God and stayed faithful and did their part, and yet the marriage broke apart. I know some people who were more incredible spouses than a lot of people who are still married, but they were married to somebody who didn't want to stay married, or they were married to someone who didn't want to stay faithful no matter how amazing their partner was. And it's tragic for that kind of a person to feel like they've failed. I know people who could teach our marriage courses at Grace, and yet their marriage dissolved. And divorce contains a stigma that needs to be broken off a lot of people. You know, God's not up in heaven wringing his hands and lamenting and feeling like he didn't measure up as God because there are people who don't believe in God. Listen, if you need to hear this today, I want you to soak this into your soul. Divorce does not mean that you failed in marriage. Now, if you did fail in marriage, if you were the cause of your marriage's breakdown, or if you were a major contribution to the marriage falling apart, then okay, own it. Make whatever amends you can make. Heal your heart, grow, and change. And if you ever have a chance to be a spouse again, then be 1,000,000 times better. But today, whether you're married or single or happy or faking it, I want all of us to process this question of how do I find true love? Because if love is of God, then there is always more to be experienced. Whether it's a friendship or siblings or parental love or romantic love, there's always more to be discovered and experienced. And so let's begin today by looking at a very simple verse in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 18, verse 22. In Proverbs 18, verse 22, a father is speaking to his son. And he says, "He who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord." Now, if he had been speaking to a daughter, he could just as easily have said, "She who finds a husband finds what is good and obtains favor from the Lord." But whenever you're wondering, how do I find true love? Either new love Or how do I rekindle love in an existing love? When we process the question, how do I find true love? From this little verse, there's several observations. Number one is this: understand that a sweetheart is more than a sweetheart. A sweetheart is more than a sweetheart. A love relationship, again, all levels, children, best friends, siblings, parents, romantic. A love relationship is more than a relationship, it's favor. Son, I know you think you found a wife, but you haven't just found a wife. What you've actually found is favor from God. Now, does that mean if I'm not married, I don't have God's favor? No, and we'll cover that. But in this life with God, there are so many things that are vastly greater than meets the eye. There's so many things we do in this life of Christian faith that are way bigger than they appear on the surface. You know, we receive communion every month. The act of taking bread and the cup is a core practice in church history and tradition and worship today. And yet we all know that when we take a little piece of bread and a little cup of juice, there's so much more behind that than it appears to be. There's rescue and redemption and forgiveness and new life wrapped up in the idea of those elements and what they represent. Here's another example. I love this verse from 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. The Apostle Peter says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So your spiritual gift is not primarily a gift, it's primarily grace expressed as a gift. And the Apostle Paul said the exact same thing in Romans 12:6. He said, we have different gifts according to the grace given to us. And I love this one from Ephesians 4:7. Paul says, to each one of us, grace has been given as Christ apportioned it. This is why it says, when he ascended on high, he took many captives and gave gifts to his people. So your gift is not prophesying. Your gift is grace expressed through speaking God's word. Your gift is not service or helps. Your gift is grace expressed in setting up a beautiful space where ministry can happen. Your gift is not teaching. Your gift is grace expressed through educating. So Christ gives grace packaged as gifts, which tells me if a person's gift is not releasing God's grace, it's not really a legitimate gift. But according to Proverbs 18:22, a wife is more than a wife, she's favor. Well, she doesn't seem like God's favor to me. It's been miserable living with her. Or he sure doesn't look like God's favor. You know, I get it. I get that there are times that we feel that way, but I wonder if we could see the favor, if we could treat the people in our relationships as God's favor. I wonder if that might change something. But that's number one. Understand that a sweetheart is more than a sweetheart. Number two, since a sweetheart is more than a sweetheart, since they're actually favor disguised as a sweetheart, number two is this: don't settle. When you're asking the question, how do I find true love? Don't settle for the wrong person, and don't settle for the wrong relationship with the right person. You can give your heart to the wrong person, or you can fail to give your heart fully to the right person. A God-approved relationship is supposed to be favor. It's supposed to be grace. It's supposed to be blessing, not something you settle for because you've just gotten comfortable at a 4, when a little bit of effort could move you up to a 9 or a 10. And it's not something that we're supposed to settle for just because we're getting older and we feel like we're running out of options. Understandably, the longer a person waits to be married, the more they're tempted to settle. I mean, I'm 40 years old now, or I'm 50 years old now, And when I look around, I don't see a lot of single, amazing, God-fearing, world-changing, available adults. And that might be true. But that's also only part of the equation. God is always writing new stories and new chapters and new works of beauty and redemption in people's lives. Don't settle. Jessica and Maddie and I were listening to a Rick Warren sermon recently, and he said a bad marriage is way worse than being single. A damaging, toxic dating relationship is a million times worse than being brilliantly single. But even so, even though we know this, we're still going to be tempted to settle at times. And so let me just remind you of another verse from the book of Proverbs. And we've talked about this verse a lot over the last year, so you'll likely be familiar with this verse. But in light of our temptation to settle when we're trying to wait for this favor from God, we need to remember Proverbs 4:23, where a son is again talking to his child, and he says, above all else. So more than any other piece of counsel I can give you, above all else, guard your heart. Everything you do flows from it. And I love the Message translation where it says, keep vigilant watch over your heart, because that's where life starts. Life begins with the heart. And not just that fist-sized muscle that beats 115,000 times per day or pumps 2,000 gallons of blood through your system every day. That's quite a muscle. But no, your heart and soul, your inner being. I told you a while back that one of the many TV series that Jessica and I binge watched during COVID was Chernobyl. And if you didn't see the documentary series about Chernobyl, you have still likely heard of Chernobyl. Chernobyl was the name of a Soviet-controlled nuclear power plant in the Ukraine in the mid-'80s. And when I was a little boy, Chernobyl had a meltdown. The chamber and the section of the structure containing the nuclear elements overheated. And we know that nuclear power is staggeringly powerful. The force that's released from the splitting of the atom can generate a country. 25% of all of the electricity in our country is run on nuclear power. When that power is harnessed well, it can power up a society, but when it's mishandled, it can devastate. And when Chernobyl melted down, it was devastating. There was so much radiation pouring out of the top of the plant that helicopters couldn't fly overhead to put the fire out. There was so much radiation oozing from the place that they said that the land around Chernobyl would be radioactive for 24,000 years. At one point, when the reporters were commenting, one of them said, the roof of Chernobyl, where the radiation was escaping, has just become the most dangerous spot on planet Earth. And according to this scripture and this counsel from this father, your heart is nuclear. Your heart is a miniature nuclear power plant inside you where your life is concerned. Your heart determines the state of your life. Your heart needs to be guarded. And why do we guard something? We guard something when it's valuable, when it's vulnerable, and when it's powerful. We guard the crown jewels of a nation because they're so valuable. We guard a baby in the nursery because it's so vulnerable. We guard a nuclear power plant because it's powerful, and so is your heart. I mean, Jesus thought you were valuable enough to give his life for. Your heart has the capacity to change society. The human heart can cure poverty. It can push back against sex trafficking. It can uphold justice. It can heal another heart. And your heart is powerful. There's a nuclear force in your heart that will determine the outcome of your life. Your heart's vulnerable. If you give it to the wrong person, it can break them, or it can break you. So don't settle. If you're single, maximize your singleness. The word single means separate, unique, and whole. That's different from being alone. Alone means all in one. That's very different than being separate, unique, and whole. There are a lot of people who get married and they're not truly single. They haven't learned how to be separate or find their uniqueness or bring a measure of wholeness to the relationship. Don't settle. Your heart is too powerful. And don't settle for mediocrity in a relationship. Listen, it's okay to be old and boring. Being old and boring in a relationship is part of God's gift to you. That's a blessing to be comfortable like a pair of slippers or a fluffy bathrobe. But if you are old and boring, make sure you're an old and boring 10. Make sure you're not old and boring because you've settled at a 3. There is so much more. And listen, yes, if you're single and you're trying not to settle, the person that you end up with, they might not be everything you planned. But if you refuse to settle, they can still be everything you have ached for. And even if you don't get that favor expressed through a sweetheart, well, 2 Corinthians 11:2 says, I'm jealous for you with a godly jealousy. I promised you to one husband, to Christ, so that I might present you as a pure virgin to him. Now, I realize when I read that verse, and if I say to a single adult who desperately wants to be married, well, you still have Jesus. I know that can sound very hollow. And I know that can sound like a consolation prize that should mean more than it does. And I get that. You can be totally separate, totally unique, completely whole, in love with Jesus, and still long to be married. That's normal. But I also will say that there are some people who have so touched a relationship with Jesus that yes, they want to be married, but they're also going to be selective because they have cultivated a space with God. And I know some people that would say, yeah, I would like to be married, but hold on a second. I'm not going to surrender what I've developed here for plan B, C, D, or E. I'm willing to invite God's person into this space, but I have touched something beautiful and special and kind. Don't settle. Don't settle with the wrong person, and don't settle for a 3 or 4 if a little bit of effort could bump your relationship to a 7 or an 8. Okay, 2 more things very quickly. Number 3, let love find you. Our verse said, he who finds a wife finds what is good and receives favor from the Lord. When you find a wife, you're actually receiving something that's been moving towards you. Whoever finds this is receiving favor. So in your quest for love, love is already on a quest for you. And I know you might be saying, well, then where is it? Why isn't it appearing? Well, it is appearing. King David famously said at the end of Psalm 23, surely goodness and mercy have been following me. And the word surely could be translated only. Only goodness and mercy, God's favor, God's love, have been following me all the days of my life. Man, sometimes I wish I could slow down enough to let that love overtake me. You know, sometimes people run so fast. We're so frantic. We're so stressed. We're so anxious. We're so on the move that love is trying to catch us, but we don't slow down long enough to let it find us. There's a reason why God tells us to stop, to slow down, to Sabbath, to rest, because he knows that if he can catch us, that love is pursuing us and love is washing over us. So do you know how to do that? Do you know how to connect with God's love, to hear his voice, to feel loved by him? If not, those are questions to pursue with your friends, your small group, with a mentor. Let love overtake you. In fact, that's essential in a healthy relationship. A healthy relationship is not where 2 people draw all the life out of each other. It's where they bring life to each other because they've learned to let love overtake them. let love find you. Number 4, last thought. Knowing that you're loved, knowing that you're enough, remembering that a sweetheart is more than a sweetheart, they're actually favor. And as you refuse to settle, number 4 is now you find love. Number 3 was let love find you. Number 4 is you find love. It says in our passage, he who finds a wife. You know, some things can't be found unless they're looked for. Now, I know God can do anything, and I know that you could walk outside your home and walk around the corner tomorrow and bump right into the love of your life, and that would be awesome. And they might make a movie out of it, and I know that could happen. But to find something of great value, we usually have to go looking for it. Abraham's servant went looking for Rebekah to bring her home to Isaac. David had to defeat 100 Philistines to win the hand of Saul's daughter. Othniel said, whoever wants to marry my daughter Aksa has to go conquer a city, or Caleb said that rather, and then Othniel stepped up and conquered the city so he could have the daughter of Caleb to be his wife. So listen, don't just pray and struggle. Pray and date. And if you do date, date well. In fact, I want you, if you're single and you're pursuing a relationship, I want you to date so well that if that relationship does not work out, that person will be better for knowing you. I want you to date so well that there are no regrets from your time spent. I want you to date so well that even if that person realizes, no, they're not for me, or no, she's not what I was actually looking for, they'll still say, but wow, they are going to be God's favor for someone, and I'm better for knowing them. So listen, if you're single today, singleness might not be your ultimate end state. You might not be single next year, or you might not be single next decade. But in the meantime, whether it's a short time or a long time, be brilliantly single. Worship God in your singleness. Understand who you are. Learn even more to hear his voice and to draw your strength from him. Listen, if you don't learn to draw strength from the love of God, you might misinterpret your story. One of the reasons that we have to let love overtake us is because if we aren't overtaken by God's love, we might misinterpret natural loves. And you might be tempted to think that your singleness is a deficiency. But when God's love captures you, you will likely realize that your singleness is not because of a deficiency in you. It's not because you're not attractive enough or you're not fun enough. We all know single people who are way more attractive than some married people. We know single people who have a much better personality than some married people. I know single people who are fascinating, and I know married people who are duds. It's not about that. You need to let love inform your story, or you may be tempted to draw the wrong conclusions about your story. Singleness might not be your end state. And if it is your end state, I might be as baffled as you, and it's possible that we'll even weep together if that doesn't happen. But I also promise you that if you live brilliantly in your singleness and you worship God in your singleness and you maximize this time in your life, I promise you, it will not have been a wasted life. And also, an eternity spent with the God who is love and who authored romantic love and beauty is it vastly eclipses a few decades of adulthood on planet Earth. So maximize your singleness. And listen, if you're married, I think we should declare our own little personal Olympic Games this summer. You know, the Olympics are coming up in a couple of months. Hey, in the story of your life, you're the Olympic contender. You haven't peaked yet in your relationship. We learned in a marriage seminar at Grace a year or so ago that if a married couple makes it to their 35th wedding anniversary, and assuming that they're still relatively whole when they get there, all of the newlywed emotions resurface with a vengeance. This is what the The research says, I'm not there yet. I'm at 26 years. But they say if you make it to the 35th, that you have like a renaissance of the newlywed years. There's more to be experienced. So you haven't peaked, so don't settle on a plateau. Let's go for it in our relationships. In America today, 1 out of every 2.5 marriages end in divorce. 1 out of every 2.5. Except for a specific niche of people. And you can fact check this. There have been credible surveys done that show that if a couple does these 3 things, if a couple attends church weekly, and I know that church attendance is on the decline in our country, but just because it's declining doesn't mean we need to decline with it. If a couple attends church weekly, if they pray together regularly, and if they read the scriptures together, those marriages end in divorce 1 out of every 1,100 times. 1 out of every 1,100. Now, I'm not talking about people who say they're Christian, because there's a lot of people in our country that say they're Christian, but they're not in church every week. They're not praying together, and they're not reading scripture. So specifically in that group of people, the divorce rate drops shockingly. And listen, all 3 of those things are largely in your control. And so if you're single, don't play the odds. 1 out of every 2.5. Maybe I'll be the one that makes it. And if you're married, you have the tools to ensure that the odds are much more significant that you make it for the long haul. So listen, don't settle. Don't play the odds. You are worth it. You are worth waiting for. Let's guard our hearts. God's favor is worth it. It's worth protecting. Let's live brilliantly for the glory of God, whether we're doing it in singleness or in marriage. And let's be a reflection of the love and the grace of God to the world around us. And let me pray in closing today. Lord Jesus, first I want to pray the way we started here. And I pray for any person who's been divorced and who's bearing the scar or maybe some shame or embarrassment or a stigma. Lord, wherever that is unnecessary, break it off of them in Jesus' name. And anyone who needs to heal and recover and look to the future, give them grace to do so. God, I pray that every person in a relationship would flourish and thrive, and it would get better and better and better. And I pray, Lord, for any single person who's looking for love, Lord, first of all, let love find them. And then I pray that they would be able to find the favor that you've packaged for them. And then, God, in closing today, I pray for any person who has never opened their heart to Jesus, who is ultimate love. If there's any person watching with me, God, who has not yet experienced your love in their soul, would you open their heart? Would you capture them? Let this be a day where they step into the greatest relationship ever conceived, God with his people. I love you all. God bless you. Pray for me. I'll be praying for you. And then next week, this will be more of a live format. We'll do the live stream, and hopefully I'll connect with you then. Have a great week.